Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly.
Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to cruise a little smarter. I'm your host, Lake, and I am joined by my co-host, Christy. Christy, how are you today?
I am well, Lake. How are you?
I am doing pretty good. We have a very exciting episode today. I am so excited to dive into this.
Yes. When I saw that this guest was doing press tours, I was like, I must reach out. I actually was watching a webinar during my lunch and he was speaking on it. And I said, no, I have to write right now and see if I can get him on our podcast. And I am so glad that we did.
Absolutely. And I think our listeners are going to enjoy this one very much. As always, they love anything where we can get into behind the scenes of operating a cruise line. And we are operating at the highest level today.
The highest level.
Well, with that, let's go ahead and welcome our guest. He was the CEO of Royal Caribbean Group for over 3 decades and is now the authoring of Delivering the Wow: Culture as a Catalyst for Lasting Success, which is available now and just debuted as number 4 on US Today's bestseller list. Without taking up any more of his time, let's welcome on Richard Fain to the show. Richard, how are you today?
I'm terrific, Lake and Christy, and thank you both for having me. It's really a pleasure to get to talk to you and your listeners.
We are so excited to have you on the show. Let's begin how we begin all shows. I mentioned it a little bit, but tell us a little bit about your cruising background.
Well, my cruising background, I have had absolutely the best job in the world. First of all, everybody's involved in the industry. Your listeners all know this because they all know the industry. This is one of the most fun industries you can possibly imagine. The stories, the background, the things that we all go through. It's just such a privilege to have been associated and continue to be associated with this wonderful industry. And I had the extraordinary pleasure of being the leading, what I, of course, think of as the best cruise company in the world. I think, of course, think of it as the best company in the world. But I get to work with extraordinary people, both within the company and out. And that's my background. I've been doing it for over 3 decades, 33 years, actually.
Awesome. And we are so excited to get into many of the aspects of the career. But why don't we go ahead and take it back before we can even discuss about fancy new ships, fancy new islands. Let's talk a little bit about the state of the cruise line industry when you first jumped in 1988.
Well, back then, and it seems like a long time ago, it was a long time ago, but the industry had already gotten established and Royal Caribbean was already a really good cruise line, a good quality, amazing guest satisfaction. Our guests loved us. And in fact, the company had been founded by Ed Steffen, who had come up with this idea of building ships just for sailing in the Caribbean. And he had gone to Norway and found investors and created from nothing this new company with these innovative new ships at the time, with a whole concept of they were quite large. They held amazing numbers, 720 passengers apiece. They were called super ships because they were so big and so much more than anybody had ever imagined, because all ships at the time were really just converted transatlantic steamers. And that was my introduction to the business. I was fortunate enough to be asked to come in as chairman and CEO. At that time, the company was small by today's standards. It was large by those standards, but it was small by today's standards. And really, the whole industry focused on the niche market of, frankly, older people with longer cruises, et cetera. And that's what the industry was like. That was the company was like. But even then, Royal Caribbean had a very strong culture, and I was lucky to enter into that.
And were you a part of the first group that ever took a ship and expanded it? You tell the story in your book, but you were the start of that concept, right?
Royal Caribbean was. I was on the board and I got to say yes to it, but it was really Ed Steffen's concept. And he took the concept and it just boggles my mind. It still does. But he said, look, we'll take this 720 passenger ship, and we'll cut it in half and we'll build a new midsection. We'll float out the bow. We'll float in the midsection. We'll float back in the bow. We'll glue it all back together. and it'll be 1,000 passenger ships. Can you imagine 1,000 guests on a ship? Yeah, that was his concept. I couldn't begin to understand it then. We've now done it with 3 ships, and I've seen it. It works. Everybody loves it, but it was so astounding at the time. And it was that kind of innovation which really was the hallmark of the company.
What would you have thought back then if someone had told you, hey, you're going to have ships that are 6 times that size in just a couple decades?
Well, I'm not sure I would have taken it totally seriously. But, at the time, the first one I got involved in was making a ship over 1,000 guests. And as I said, people were worried that, it's going to be too big. People aren't going to feel right on board. And we ended up studying it and deciding that not only was it right and the guests loved it, but we should build something dramatically bigger. We ended up building the Sovereign of the Seas at 2,282 guests. And my biggest problem at the time, or one of the biggest problems at the time, was convincing everybody, including the board, that wasn't too large, that people would actually like the larger ship. And so at the time, the idea that we would build a ship that could hold 6, 7, 8,000 guests and 3,000 crew members, we couldn't even have conceived of it. But our whole focus was innovation, continuous innovation, always getting better. And that's essentially what's happened.
And to put this in perspective for listeners, one of my favorite things about the book is your ship terminology that you throw in the chapters. And in one section, you talk about gross tons and where it started from. And that's how a lot of us know how large a ship is, by what is the gross ton. I appreciate how you were talking about how the Mayflower was 180 gross tons. And then the Sovereign of the Seas that you just talked about was 73,000 gross tons. The Icon of the Seas is 248,000 gross tons. Mind-boggling if you think about the size difference. And what would you say the Freedom?
Freedom was 155,000 tons, roughly. So this, first of all, Chrissy, thank you for that. I hope my publisher is listening, because my publisher said, those little vignettes at the beginning of every chapter, they're going to be distracting. You don't need that. And I love them. So
yes, they're so good.
So thank you for saying that. I'm going to use your support to tell them that they got it wrong. But yeah, gross tons was originally the way you measured a ship's ability was how many casks of wine it could carry. It was remember, this was the French who dominated a lot of this trade. And so they wanted ships, and how much could they carry? And so literally a ship that could carry 700 casks of wine. And a cask of wine was called a tun, T-U-N. That's what the French called it. And so that evolved to, we measure ships by how many of these wine casks it can hold. And as you said, I forget the number for the Mayflower, but it was a relatively small number. The clipper ships could carry 700-800 casks of wine. There were 700-800 tons. An aircraft carrier is 100,000 tons.
That's it?
That's an aircraft carrier. Yes. So you can see how it has grown over time, and our way of looking at this has changed. But come back to the Mayflower. The trip on the Mayflower was unbelievably miserable. It was a real suffering to take that trip across. It was the only way you could do it then. But the ability to make ships that are so large and so grand and have these large open spaces was revolutionary. So the ton became, the tun became ton, T-O-N. And that is, and what most people don't understand is, it's a measure of volume. It's literally how many casks you can hold, whether that cask is empty or is carrying lead weight. And that's how they measure ships. And it's that volume of ship. And they've obviously grown, as you say, to 248,000, 2.5 aircraft carriers for Icon of the Seas. But I promise you, it's more than 2.5 times as much fun on Icon than on an aircraft carrier.
I was just on the Star of the Seas, and that episode for our trip report is going up for our listeners the same week this one goes up. And that ship is so fantastic. I think that it's just so different. And I've described it as it eats people, which this isn't a very formal way to describe it, but like no other ship I've been on. There are so many guests on the cruise ship, and you're not standing in long queues. You're not in large crowds. Like if you're at the party in the by the Pearl or whatever, there's a lot of people in the promenade because it's supposed to. But moving about the ship is easy. That ship is a knockout of the park. Royal Caribbean is so good at entertainment. And then they took that amazing entertainment and even made it better on this ship and how they placed everything. I am a big fan.
Well, thank you, Christy. It's part of the whole concept. We said, and this was really the transition from, you asked me at the beginning here about the ships back in the 1980s and early 1990s. And we really saw that our long-term view was not just to be the best cruise line, but to be the best vacation provider. Well, if you're going to be the best vacation provider, you have to satisfy everybody, and you have to satisfy them. You have to give them the choices. You have to give them alternatives. You have to give them things to do, and you have to give them space to do it. So, nobody says when I go to New York, oh, there are too many restaurants. It's going to be crowded because there are a lot of people going to restaurants. No, there are more restaurants. You just spread them around. So what we've done is we've made the ships larger so that there are a lot of people, but they're all spread out. They're not in one restaurant. And if you're in a restaurant that holds, let's say, 120 seats, what difference does it make whether there's another restaurant down the ship that also holds another 120 people? It's not 240 people, it's 120 because you're in that area. And so what the team has done, and I'm just in awe of these people who put all this together, is they found ways to spread people around. So yes, there are a lot of people on board, but they're spread around. And by the way, we apply the exact same philosophy when we're building our smaller ships. Again, you go on board Celebrity Flora or Silver Origin or Silver Endeavor. They're small ships, 100, 150 guests, but there's places to go and things to do. Choice. People don't want to be pushed in a certain direction. They want a choice of where to go.
To that topic really quick. So, and let's just say, in case people don't know, you were CEO of Royal Caribbean Group, which owns Royal Caribbean, Silver Sea, and Celebrity.
As well as our joint venture with TUI Cruises and Hapag-Lloyd Cruises in Germany. Yeah.
Even when you guys developed the river cruise and came into the river cruise market, you even made choices there. But you've made choices in your river cruise ship, which I also think is innovative.
It's exactly the same. I mean, if you go back to those first Royal Caribbean ships, which were terrific. I mean, it's that spirit of innovation was there. By the way, I built on the shoulders of giants. The next generation of Royal Caribbean Group is also building on the past, and it's better today than it was 5 years ago. 5 years ago was better than it was 10 years ago. 5 years from now, it'll be better still. It's that constant improvement that we focus on. But yeah, even the river cruise, I'm so excited about the river cruise. And obviously the people are too, because they just sell out as soon as we open them up for bookings. But again, we're not just providing a form of transportation. We're not just providing a dining room to go to. You have choices. We want things to do. And so if I want to go and read a book, that's fine. But if I want to see a real show, I can do that too. Or if I want to, it's the choices.
Ultimately, that was even how my family chose. We have booked for 2027, the Galapagos on the Flora, because I still get the naturalist. You need the naturalist. That's the point of the Galapagos. But you've given me the naturalist, but you've given me the comfort of a celebrity ship.
First of all, I'm really glad you mentioned the naturalist. So part of the whole thing here, first of all, I'm very proud of our ships. I don't want to pretend otherwise. I'm very proud of our islands. I'm very proud of our architecture. I'm very proud of the art. But what makes the Royal Group special is the people. It's the people. It's the people. It's the people. They're the ones that make it. Naturalists are one part of that experience. But it doesn't mean that you have to have a simpler ship. You can have beautiful art and great naturalists. And so Celebrity Flora, which cruise you just took on. First of all, the Galapagos is just an amazing place to visit, and you don't want to take away from it. Because you don't go to the Galapagos for anything other than you want to see the wildlife in their natural habitat and see the distinctions between even islands that are a mile apart. But it doesn't really hurt to have a comfortable sofa to sit in. It doesn't really hurt to have a wonderful, elegant stairwell to come up out of your of your boat or when you're coming back from scuba diving. So you can build on that and make it feel more like home. So I think what we're so proud of is not only the ships are beautiful, but they provide more and they give you more opportunity.
I love it. Well, while we're talking about providing more and giving more opportunity, I would love to talk a little bit about the development of the activities and some of the entertainment that you have developed throughout the ships. I think Royal Caribbean does a great job of providing some absolutely one-of-a-kind and unique experiences aboard its ships. I mean, where else are you finding ice rinks aboard the ships or diving shows? Could you kind of walk us through like how we went from what your entertainment looked at like back in 1988 to now you've got all sorts of water shows and amazing experiences on these newer ships?
And how does the conversation with the lawyers go about let's have somebody dive off of the highest platform on a moving ship into a teeny tiny pool? How does that conversation go?
So, Christian Lake, I'm really happy you raised the entertainment because I'm just so impressed with the entertainment that we have throughout the group. But it just fits into, we're not just providing a cruise. We want to provide an experience. We want to provide a vacation. And going back, when cruising started, your entertainment was a waiter singing "Oh Sole Mio," "Oh Sole Mio," and you don't. It's terrific. And by the way, we had terrific waiters and some of them could actually sing well. And we had shows and everything else. But it wasn't a theater in those days. And it wasn't anything special. It was just a room. It had some chairs in it and some little tables to put your drink on. And the shows were fine. But again, at Royal Caribbean, fine is not a compliment. And so what we said was, what is it people want? And they want all this stuff. And they want activities, and they want activities they can do, and they want activities they can see others do. Lake, you mentioned the ice skating rink and the aqua theater. So I'll tell you something on the aqua theater. So first of all, for all of your information, there is a difference between a board and a platform, and we have boards and we have platforms. And if you've gone to or seen the Olympics, the board is at 3 meters. It's 3 meters off the water, and it bounces and everything else, and you can do some terrific things. But, when you see these divers go off a 10-meter platform, that's 30 feet, more than 30 feet, and you see it. Now, that's a platform. It doesn't move. And so they have to do everything. They don't get the springing effect. And so we did design it. And yes, safety is a key factor. And we had, thorough safety reviews to make sure that this was safe. And I don't know how many shows we've done, and we really know what we're doing. It is amazing that they can do that from the 10 meters up and even see the water and never mind make these beautiful twists and turns and everything else. And by the way, you're on a moving ship. One of the interesting tidbits I'll just mention here was we designed it originally for a 10-meter platform. That's the largest platform there is in the world. But we wanted a large crown and anchor over it, and we wanted a structure that surrounded it. And if all you do is take and make a platform that's 10 meters like they do at the Olympics, it doesn't look very good. And we believe in things should look nice. So there's a 10-meter platform, but then there's a structure that goes above that. And when we were going through the early stages of this on Oasis, when we were designing Oasis, we brought out Oasis, we brought in experts, Olympic divers, other who had expertise in this, and asked them to try it out. And they tried it out from the 3-meter board. They tried it out from the 10-meter platform. And then one of them, still can't quite believe it, but one of them said, well, there's this structure that goes up another 7 meters. And so what are you doing with that? And we said, well, that's just holding up the crown. It's giving the whole thing a sense of scale and proportion. It's really just cosmetic. It just looks nice. And he said, well, it looks to me like a diving platform. So there's a worker's ladder sort of that goes up to the 17 meters. And he went up and dived from 17 meters. And it was a wow. And our other divers said, well, as long as it meets all the safety requirements, we can do that too. So I just love it. And in fact, we had a bit of an argument with Michael Bailey when we were designing Icon. And because the dome is so big, we could only go up 16 and a half meters. And Michael said, what are you talking about? The Oasis is 17 meters. Whatever we do, it has to be more than Oasis. So we actually put a little oculus in the dome on Icon class ships. And so it goes up 17.00001 meters. But anyhow, that's how that came about.
Love it. Well, we've kind of naturally segued into ships getting bigger and ship design. One thing our listeners love is hearing about what goes into designing the ships. Could you tell us, especially when we're having these conversations about ships growing larger and what to put in the ships, like what does the groundwork for that look like, especially in the initial conversation of like, okay, we need to build another ship. Where are we starting?
Well, where we're starting is with the people. It is always the people. And so where we start is, traditionally ships started with the engine room has to be very large, and the engine room clearly has to go here, and the trash needs to go here, and the galleys need to go here. And then you build around that. And the result you build is something that's not as easy to get around as you would like. So we really said, no, the purpose of the ship is to provide a guest experience unlike any others. Let us start with the guest experience. And that's really where we came out. And the other thing is, particularly as the ships get larger, it becomes even more important that the ship be easy to get around. In the good old days, people accepted that ships were a little bit like rabbits warren, a little hard to navigate around, how to find your way. And we said, no, a big part of what should make us special is that our ships are easy to get around, that everything is logical. And so we've employed a number of mechanisms to do that, and they've been amazingly successful. And I think part of the reason that people like the ship so much is they don't have to think about it. It's obvious. If I'm here and I want to go there, it's obvious where I go. And so, for example, on Oasis class ships, we came up with the concept of neighborhoods. So you had a restaurant neighborhood and all the restaurants are together. You're going to the restaurant neighborhood. When you're in Chicago, you're going downtown to the restaurant district, the food district. You do it the same thing on our ship. If you go to the entertainment district, you come out of the main theater, and there to your right is the disco, there to your left is the comedy club and the jazz club, straight ahead is the ice skating extravaganza, to the left and above is the Latin dancing, the karaoke is up and to your right. It's all there. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to read a map. And that requires a lot of architectural work in creating the atrium or the royal promenades. So you want to make it easy to get around. And then you say, what do our people want? Our guests want to be entertained. They want activities. They want some activities where they go and watch a show. They want some activities where they are interactive with it. So rock climbing wall came about. That was a big one. And people like to do it. Now, not everybody likes to climb a rock climbing wall. In fairness, when we started this, I thought it was one of the dumbest ideas I ever heard of. And I tried it and I couldn't get up it, but I did manage to scrape my knuckles. But it turns out that sort of 10% of everybody on board really likes to do it and is successful at it. And so by making the ship larger and having more things to do, if you're the 10% that wants to go rock climbing, you can do that. If you're the 10% that wants to go to the champagne bar, you can go there. I'm in the latter category, but to each their own.
Well, Lake and I always say one of the best things about cruising is it really is a choose your own adventure. It literally is something for everybody. And I think that's what we like about it so much. And when you're doing a family trip, a multi-generation trip, a friends group trip, a combination of it all, it's great because everybody gets to do what they want and what is good for their group, and they can come back together. So yeah, that's why we're such big proponents of cruising.
Well, and you're absolutely right. I mean, where else can you go that when your kid goes to this area, you feel quite comfortable? Oh, they'll go. I know where they are. I know they're not going anywhere. But you all come together when you want. So you can spend as much time with your family as you want. When you need a little relief from them, you can also all go to your own corners and act that way.
So I have a question. Is there anything on any particular ship that you were around for the design for that you look at and you were like, that is specifically me? Whether it was a change you said had to be made or something you said, this is how I want it. And you can go on that ship and say, that's Richard.
So I think people often ask me that. And my answer is, what's special about Royal Caribbean is it's not one person's genius. Everybody likes to think of as an epiphany, and we're all involved in this. And it's very much, that's the key to the culture. And that's what I talk about in the book, is how do you create a culture where everybody feels that they can weigh in on everything? And so I won't answer that question, because I really feel that it is the culture that brought us all together that made that happen. I will mention two funny stories actually that kind of touch on that. On board, and I'm not 100% sure which ship it was. I think it was Oasis. We go and visit the shipyard, and the Sorrento's pizza restaurant had a brick, and they had used a very modern, shiny brick. It didn't look very realistic. And a number of us, including myself, just thought it was wrong. And so we asked them to use a different kind of brick. These are still in mock-ups. And we came back, because we basically go once a month, and we come back a month later, and they have put up a much nicer, much more antique kind of feeling brick. And I had maybe been more vocal about how much I liked or didn't like the previous version. So the head of the shipyard said, "Richard, would you carve your initials in this brick so that we know that we've got this approved?" And they gave me a little chisel sort of thing to do it with. And so I did. I vandalized the brick, and I came back a month later for delivery. There was the brick. He said, "Richard, there's your mark. You've approved it. And so we're going to close tomorrow. It'll be your ship tomorrow, but I want you to know we still have this brick that you've approved." We're all happy. We come back the next morning. On our way to the signing, we passed by the brick and found that somebody had replaced the brick, thinking it had been vandalized. And I guess I did vandalize it. But anyhow, the head of the yard thought that was pretty funny. The one other thing I will mention is onboard Celebrity Edge. The architects for the plaza and the passageway back to the restaurants, his father had been a welder at the shipyard, and brilliant designers. But he said, "I want to have something, you cover up all the steel in the ship. So I'm going to take a section of this pathway and expose the raw steel from the ship." And so there was this thing, and they have all the coverings, but then they had left a gap in the coverings, and you could see the raw steel with all the markings and all the graffiti and all the other stuff. And it was just terrific. It was just showed the ship and the welds and everything else. And it was raw steel. And that was fine. And again, we went to the delivery ceremony. And then when we're walking by it in the afternoon, somebody had gone and cleared off all the graffiti, all the markings. They left the raw steel, of course, but you obviously don't want that. So somebody coming to help out and clean up what was just clearly a mess of markings. Oh, it was sad.
I think on one of the ships, there is markings. Maybe it's future ones, because you still have that area on the way to the dining rooms that you can see. Yeah, and I'm certain that I've seen writing on some of them.
Well, we went ape over, but you can't be angry, because somebody's really trying to clean things. They're just trying so hard. But it was just so disappointing to me. But yes, on the later series of ships in the Edge class, we asked them to keep more of the original markings. But on Edge, which was the first of the class, and the markings were really good, actually. And the graffiti was good. Somebody at the shipyard was an artist, but in any event, it went. Slightly sad. That should be our biggest problem.
And it's these little stories that I really like so much in the book. And so for the listeners, especially, and we'll talk about it more at the end, but people who love the backstory about how ships are designed, or even the acquisition of Royal Caribbean Group being what it is now. These backstories, these like behind the scenes stories are so fantastic for cruise enthusiasts. And obviously the management style is also wonderful, which you gather from the book, but just these little tiny anecdotes are just, they're so great. It was such a joy to read this book. So,
well, thank you for that, Christy. But what I really was hoping, and some people seem to think we've succeeded, was that these are lessons. These are, the stories tell the lesson and it makes the lesson real. So I got the best of both worlds. I think what we did in terms of the culture, developing the culture over time was exciting for me. But being able to explain it in a way that resonates with people, and the stories do tend to make these things real.
I love it oh so much. Well, we do have a couple questions from some of our Patreon members, and I think this was a good time to tie this one in. One of them asks, going back to ship size, how big could ships get, and how can cruise companies continue to supersize ships without limiting the ports they can get into?
That's actually a question a lot of people are curious about. So I'm glad you asked it, or your listener did. First of all, I obviously don't know the answer. I started out by mentioning that if I had looked back when I started at Royal Caribbean, I could never have imagined that we would be building almost 250,000 ton vessel. I had to fight like mad to get approval for a 70,000 ton vessel, 72,000, which we thought was so large. So I'm not sure I'm good at predicting the future, but I would emphasize that we don't build ships just to make them larger. We build them larger because we have too many ideas that just don't fit in a smaller box. And so if you want to add something, if you're adding an ice skating rink, for example, it needs a lot of space. If you want to add a dome, an aquadome that has an ability to dive from 17 meters and put on shows and water shows and swimming expertise and have the ships need to be large. And so the ships have grown to accommodate the ideas. If there are new ideas, the ships are going to have to grow to accommodate it. I don't know that there are. I think that we have gotten large enough to do almost anything we want on the ships, but I don't know the future. And frankly, that's now Jason Liberty's job, and I know he'll do that brilliantly. The other thing is, there is a bit of a misconception. There are very, very few ports that the port size actually constrains the size of the ship. The Icon of the Seas is infinitely more maneuverable than Song of Norway was way back when. And it's the maneuverability. You can just go in and you can park wherever you need. The ports need to be large, but basically that's not a constraining influence. The ships can get larger because they tend to get wider and taller and only a little longer. And that's all the port cares about is the length. So I don't know what's coming next. I'm excited to see it. I think the team at Royal Caribbean Group are just so good. And again, I would emphasize not only in making larger ships, but I think part of the trick of our new building team led by Harry Kula, Kelly Gonzalez, and all those people, and the innovation that people like Michael Bailey and Laura Hodges and Bert Hernandez come up with apply to smaller ships. So Bert's biggest ship would fit in the atrium on Michael's biggest ship. But it doesn't mean that there isn't the opportunity to have just as much imagination going into making the ship small as there is in making it large. And in fact, that's part of the skill. And I think what I appreciate about our team is they're good at both. It isn't just a one-trick pony.
I love all of those answers. Well, going into another question we had talking about the ports, how did you continue to find new ports and negotiate new ports for your cruises to go, especially as not just Royal grows, but as the entire cruise industry grows, those spaces become more and more competitive? And what goes into, again, finding new and interesting places, but also securing and continuing to secure the additional ports that you already visit?
Well, that's a fascinating question. And I'm really happy to hear it because one of the things I'm proudest of is the economic impact that we have on the communities that we serve. And so I know some people think, well, how do you convince this community or that community to come there, to let us come there? It's really, in almost every case, it's the other way around. We bring so much economic activity. It's so valuable to the local population. We really view ourselves as being partners with the places that we go to. And we try and be good and constructive and helpful partners with them. And so I actually remember very, very soon after I joined Royal Caribbean, I became the recipient of a campaign from San Diego. And what they had done is they had essentially all the bigwigs in the community, the mayor, the commission, the council, the big business, small business. And what they did was they got a whole bunch of people to send me postcards. And every postcard started out, it was a brilliant campaign. Every postcard started out, did you know? And then they told some factoid about how wonderful San Diego was. And it was a terrific campaign. And it said to me, cruise lines go where they're wanted. And it said to me, these people want us to come there. We would like to go there. And I would say, and we did, and it was a boon to the local community and a boon to us. And that's the best kind of business I like to be in.
Well, and that segues, in my opinion, to your leadership style as a whole. And even something remarkable that you did during the dark times, the unpleasant period that we went through earlier in this decade. And you came on and talked to travel advisors about once a month, I think. It was during the coffee talks that were put on for travel advisors. And you gave us such hope. And you quickly became my favorite CEO. You put yourself out there. You explained things. Your leadership style was shown. You showed your compassion for the crew and their families and the company. And it really came through. So I just want to say thank you for those moments, because as a travel advisor, you helped me personally get through those sort of dark days and find hope. And you just were such an inspiration. So thank you.
Well, that's very kind of you. And I do say this in the book. This wasn't a generous gesture. We needed the travel advisor community to be there when we came out of it. I think it's part of the culture of Royal Caribbean to look long term and not to say, woe is me. Woe is me is not a strategy. Woe is me doesn't get you anywhere. But let's look at this. And I frankly was gratified and surprised at the response. I think people were surprised because I wasn't sugarcoating anything. I was just open about it. The whole process was very cathartic for me. I mean, it helped me. It actually forced me to sort of, wait a minute, how does this look from the point of view of our employees? How does this look from the point of view of our travel advisors? How does this look from the point of view of others? And so that was actually a very helpful thing to me. And I'm, of course, tickled pink that a lot of people liked it. But I do think it helped me. But I also think it's something that we're missing a lot today. I just told it like it is. I didn't sugarcoat things, but I didn't bemoan things either. It was just, this is what it is. We knew we would come out of this. We didn't know when. And of course, that was much longer than we had hoped. But we knew we were going to come out of it. And we knew, and at Royal Caribbean Group, we knew when we came out of it, we would come out of it strong.
Well, I think that segues great into my next topic I would like to discuss. Coming out of those dark times, we all got to participate in what we would call the restart on various levels. Me very much as a consumer, Christy as an agent, and you, of course, as CEO of the Royal Caribbean Group. Could you talk a little bit about what it was like bringing those first ships back out of that time?
Wow. Well, Lake and Christy, I really can't thank you enough for making me relive some of the worst moments of my life. No, you're not. You're not the least bit sorry.
Hold up. I'm going to throw out that Richard did ask to want to discuss this before I get thrown under the bus.
Yes, indeed. No. But I think, it's important to understand there were good times and there have been bad times. And our ability to come through the bad times is, as an industry, all of us, we at Royal Caribbean Group, other cruise lines, travel advisors, guests, etc., our ability to come out of this. But I do remember one of the experiences that was probably one of the most meaningful of my life was when we did come out finally. And this was at the very end. This was in sort of June of 2021, yes. And we were emerging. We're now finally allowed to come back. We now had a set of protocols that allowed us to come back safely. And so we were coming back, and our first two ships, and they were also the industry's first two ships coming back, were Celebrity Edge and Freedom of the Seas. And those were the first two ships back. And I went to visit the ships in port, and I went on board. The first was Celebrity, second was Freedom. And I went on board, and I was due to meet some people in the plaza there on the Celebrity Edge and on the Royal Promenade on Freedom. And basically you came in through the crew gangway because that was the only gangway open. And then you walk over to the elevators 20, 30, 40 feet away and take the elevators up to the plaza. When I got when I got to the end of the gangway, there's a security guard there, and she just hugged me and started crying. And it took me an hour and a half to go that 30, 40 feet, whatever it is. And it seemed like every crew member on board was there, every single one of them. They weren't, of course, but it was packed. Everybody had a story. Everybody had a story, and it was horrific. What they had all been through and came out strengthened, came out strong, came out happy, came out proud, came out ready to face the world. It was just invigorating. I've never taken so many selfies. I've never cried so much. I've never heard so many wonderful stories. And to see the suffering that they had all been through, remember, there's 18 months of hell. And it was just amazing. So that was the end of it. At that point, we had finally come back. But remember, this was sort of a begrudging coming back, and you're coming back under protocols, and you're going to do this and do that, and everybody's going to be looking, and to come back and to have these crew members be so enthusiastic, so proud, and so strong. I knew we were off to the races, and as we now know we were. But that to me was the culmination of it all, and one of the more emotional periods of my life.
Well, and it brings us back to the people. The people is what makes Royal Caribbean Group so special. It's these crew members. There is just, I don't know where crew members for cruise ships come from, but they are a special breed. They're just so passionate and so lovely. And you can tell that you all foster that from the leadership level because they have so much pride in their work as well.
It really is amazing. They thrill me every day, and it boggles my mind that they do what they do with such passion, with such skill. You'd think they're the ones on vacation. And it's a hard job. It's a hard job.
It's long
hours. And during the pandemic, everybody suffered terribly, and the uncertainty. Oh, yeah. So thank you for commenting on that.
But you know what? During those times, one of the things I also appreciated is you used and allowed social media to be used to show what your company was doing. So you have people looking at Celebrity Edge, for example, and how the culinary team, they were only cooking for the other crew members, still made these giant, beautiful cakes and fruit displays and all of this like gorgeousness for themselves and for each other. And you let us see a piece of that during that time too. And it just the heart from the company was shown for everybody to see. It was so great.
They were terrific. I constantly expected that I'm going to hear crew members yelling, ranting, and raving. If I were them, I would have thrown something at me. Why aren't you fixing this, Richard? But they didn't. They couldn't have been more supportive of the company, of us in the leadership, of each other. It was just, I can't describe it. It was thrilling to behold.
Yeah. So as you can tell, we are really big about highlighting our crew interactions. We love to make sure that they get recognized on every show for every cruise we talk about. Do you have maybe just another crew interaction story you would like to highlight before we move on?
Well, I have so many, and I almost hate to single anyone out because they are so special. But there was one I know I used in the book that I was on board a ship, had some extra time between meetings, and there weren't any guests on board, so I sort of wandered around, and I like to go to the back office space, and I wandered into a scullery, and there was this very large Jamaican guy washing pots, and we got to talking, and he said, "Oh, Mr. Richard," they call me Mr. Richard. "I met you on Song of America in whatever year that was, and I was going to come and see you." And actually, when you're the CEO of a company, an employee says, "I was going to come and see you," it doesn't usually augur well. But I'm sure, why was he going to come and see me? He says, "Well, I've been with the company for, I think it was 27 years or something, and I'm leaving. I'm leaving in April. And I wanted you to understand why." And he said, "I've been with the company for all this time, and I educated my children because I had this great job. and I educated my daughter, and she finished school, and she started a business. And on vacation, I have gone to help her with her business. And that was fine. But now her business has grown and she needs me full time. And so I'm going to leave to go and help her. And I didn't want you to think it was anything other than that. And oh my God, I mean, that's just mind-boggling. And, I felt so good. I felt so good, that I was part of a company that had made such a difference in a family's lives. And I knew that he was one of thousands. I mean, we have 110,000 employees. So to know that you're making that kind of a difference, but also that he had that sense of family with the company, it was just invigorating. So I think that's one story that sticks in my mind.
I love it. Yeah, we could certainly sit here all day and talk about the amazing crew that you can find on board, but we will probably need to wrap it up here. We did want to take another moment to just discuss your book and who you thought your book was best suited for and what surprised you about writing the book.
So I wrote the book because so many people had speak to me about the culture at Royal Caribbean, and they were always amazed by it. And I'm always amazed by it. But people just kept saying, Richard, these people are just so amazing. And how do you do that? And so I really felt that I had learned something good thing I learned something in 33 years, and that there was something that was worth passing on about how that culture came about and how it continued to evolve. And at the same time, we have so many loyal past guests. The idea of having essentially a conversation with them was thrilling to me. So that's where the book came out. Really, two audiences. One is people in any industry or in any endeavor. It can be a nonprofit, it can be a camp, it can be anything that I felt maybe would be interested in the lessons I've learned at Royal Caribbean about culture, and our loyal guests who are also interested in what happens in the company. And I think they all feel, as you do, that it's the crew that is so special. And how does that come about? So, and then in terms of what did I learn? So I think part of what made my job so gratifying at Royal Caribbean was I learned something new every day. Every day. There was something new and weird that would come out. And I learned so much in doing the book. First of all, I learned about a whole other industry. It was much more work than I expected. Hell, I have to do these podcasts like this, and I didn't do a lot of that, and I love it. But how you write a book, what goes in, what you have to take out because that's too long and boring. So it was an interesting experience. I learned in the process, and that's what keeps me going every day.
I love it. Thank you again so much for coming on. Once again, Richard's book is Delivering the Wow: Culture as a Catalyst for Lasting Success. Richard, where can our listeners find your book?
Anywhere books are sold, independent booksellers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any of those kinds of places. I'm actually one of the things I was pleasantly surprised about. I'm not sure if I'm angry or excited, but most of these places are now sold out of the hard copies. And so they're now replenishing them. That's been interesting to see. So it turns out that you can't get it overnight, but that should change fairly quickly. And it's also available in Kindle and in an audio version. Interestingly, my board encouraged me to do the audio version myself. Most books are narrated by an actor. Having done the process, I can tell you I can understand why most people have actors do the work for them. It is much more difficult than I ever imagined, but it was also satisfying and gratifying.
Well, and we get to hear your voice telling your story. And that is exactly. And that is something that makes an audio version of this type of book, I think, extra special. So, and your proceeds are going to a charity for this book. Is that correct?
Yes.
Vicky Freed made fun of you, saying that maybe as CEO, you have earned some money in your time, and that was so funny. Also, I love your relationship with her. But then she talked about the charities. So can you talk about that for a second?
Well, Vicky is just, except when she makes fun of me, she is really the cat's meow. She's amazing. She's just an extraordinary human being. But yeah, so, education was very important in my life. And when I grew up, I was always taught education is absolutely critical for any endeavor. And a lot of people can't afford it. And so actually, as far back as 1999, my wife and I started a fund just for the children of Royal Caribbean employees. And we've funded it, and it's continued to operate. It's now giving out, I'm pleased to say, about $200,000 in scholarships a year. And so all, not the profits, but the proceeds, my proceeds, the publisher takes their cut first, but everything that would have come to me will going into this scholarship fund, which we're very happy about. And hopefully it does a little good to some people.
That's so great.
That is truly amazing. Well, Richard, where else can our listeners follow you?
I'm not really doing much on social media. I know that's a blasphemy today. I do have a LinkedIn account, and there's a couple of things on that. But I think that what they should do is follow Royal Caribbean, and the executives there are doing a lot more than I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much. Well, this has been such an informative episode. Lots of really great details diving into the Royal Caribbean Group. Again, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank
Blake,
you.
Christy, thank you very much for having me. And thanks to your listener for making Royal Caribbean so successful.
Thank you.
And thank you. Well, Christy, where can our listeners follow you?
You can find me all over the internet at Pack Your Pixie Dust. And Lake, where can we find you?
You can find me on YouTube and Instagram at mouse.gen. And of course, you can always follow the podcast at DCL Podcast and find more information on our website at dclpodcast.com. But that is going to wrap up this episode. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will see you next time on the DCL Podcast. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Well, once again, we want to thank Richard Fain for coming on and sharing his adventures with the Royal Caribbean Group. If you're interested in picking his book up, you can check the show notes right below to grab your copy today. If you're enjoying the show, we greatly appreciate you leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We'd also like to thank our Patreons who help make this show happen each and every week. You too can help support the show by visiting us at patreon.com/DCL Podcast. Whether you're boarding a cruise, enjoying a trip to the parks, or adventuring outside of Disney, on behalf of myself, Christy, and Steve, we want to wish you smooth sailing and safe travels. See you next time on the DCL Podcast.
The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.